Good morning, gang. Hope everybody's having a good weekend. A little warm weather seems to be hitting everybody. It's nice enough for us to actually get some stuff planted in the garden. Got our beets and radishes and spinach put in because it was time for those to plant outside. So Mrs. P and I got some stuff done today in between raindrops and did that. But that's not what I want to talk about today. Kind of want to talk a little bit about kind of all what's going on in the whole lockdown, CV scenario that we got going on. Okay. Now, basically, I think that the panic in the face of COVID, which of course exists, okay, and again, I don't want anybody saying that I don't think it exists, okay, it's absolutely real, all right, but I think the panic has something to do with people's changing attitude toward death, all right. Previously, the rites of death were recognized and reckoned with. Okay? People died from epidemics. Quarantines were introduced in places. But life under epidemics was not redrawn for a long time. Certainly not what we're looking at now. It's, everybody's saying, oh, this might go on forever. Death itself is a normal thing. Now, humanity has seemed to suggest to itself that we're on the verge of victory over death, or at least taming it, okay? Now, people talk about this all the time, a cure for cancer, what the average lifespan of people is and how that's growing, okay? Hell, we talk about it all the time, surviving an SHTF situation, okay? The human race has some sort of fascination with immortality. For some reason, we think, all of us, that somehow we can cheat death. Think about it. Replacement of organs, rejuvenation via CPR, and of course, the jab, okay? There are a ton more examples that you can come up with. These things are all, lumped into the category of scientific advances, but all they really are ways that we have figured out that we can cheat death. After all, that's why we're all here, watching channels like this. We're trying to figure out another way to cheat death, how to survive some sort of apocalyptic event or the next hurricane or tornado or wildfire or COVID, okay? Death, which had become a feeble old woman, invades our life on a daily basis. Every day we do something to stave off death. And I'm not talking about eating or anything like that, but I am talking about our tolerance for risk. Okay, most of us don't jump out of airplanes for fear of death. We don't play with fire or mess with electricity for fear of death. It's in our DNA. We're genetically dispositioned to want to survive. Okay, we don't want to die, but for some reason, humanity thinks it can stop death from coming at all. Okay, I tell you this: death is a certainty. It's coming to every one of us. Okay, it can't be avoided. Yet still, for some silly reason, we think we can eradicate death altogether, and humanity will always think this and has always thought this, okay? Think of Ponce de Leon and the Fountain of Youth, okay? In fact, the Fountain of Youth, it was only a deception that was revealed, a trick, a phantom that consisted of another promise of an elixir of immortality. Tales of such a fountain have been recounted around the world for thousands of years. Nothing new. Now, in regards to death, let's go back a couple of generations. Talk about funerals. Okay, funerals were almost events. People would dress in their finest clothing. Work would not be done for a day or two. The deceased was given a place of honor at the front of the room, and everyone would pay their respects to the family. The church service was long. The deceased was given over to God. The best horse and carriage or the best limo and hearse were used, and multitudes of people were at the burial plots. Today, people show up to funerals in jeans. They drop in for a minute to pay their respects. The limousine's still used. Maybe there's a church service, maybe not. Okay. A few family members show up at the burial site, and people go back to work that afternoon. Okay. We've become disposable in society, and the elites view us that way. We're disposable. Today, people are dying exclusively in hospitals, preferably in an unconscious state, and even being euthanized. Suddenly, as if in violation of a contract, a contract that death itself did not sign, we think we can cheat death. We're just going to say, hey, we're not fulfilling our end of it. We're not going to die. The collapse of these illusions is colossal, okay? The world has this crazy idea it can stop all diseases. Miracle elixirs have been created over the years, and they'll all supposedly save humanity. But yet people are still dying. Even the billionaires are still dying. Even the elites are still dying. And this is the huge collapse of these illusions of immortality for them. And the elites don't want to part with that illusion. Yet it still comes every day. The billionaires are trying to stop death altogether. Just like they can just order it to stop. I'm a billionaire. You are not allowed to die. Okay. It was the old running joke when I was in the Army. Sorry, you didn't have permission to die. Can't do it. Okay. Like everything else, surrounding death, deception runs rampant. Okay. We're deceived by promises of a false prophet, and the majority of the world's population just blindly accepts whatever they're told and does exactly as they are instructed. I think we all know who I'm talking about here. Let me pose a speculation to you. Remember I mentioned the other day about how the goal was for everything to be inventoried? Land, food, animals, plants, even people? Okay. What if the jab is not to give you something, but to actually take something from you? Okay. By that I mean your DNA. Okay. The elites are eventually going to explain to you that having your DNA will be safer for you, that will allow them to monitor you for health concerns. Basically, they're playing on your fears of death. Now, like I said, this is purely speculation on my part, but it makes sense. DNA is the one way we, as people, can be inventoried. Other than identical twins, no two people's DNA are the same. Okay? People scream and yell about a national ID card all the time. Your DNA is an international ID card. No matter where you go, you'd be able to be identified through blood, through saliva, through skin cells, through hair, through any other bodily fluid or bodily mass. You'd be known. Okay? Then the database would inevitably be connected to everything else. Your credit score, your criminal record, your taxes, your medical records. And anyone with access to this database could have all this information with a click of their mouse. The only way, of course, to get out of this database is death. In this inventory system, your worthiness could also be determined. Now, imagine a panel of people combing the database because it's determined that the world is still overpopulated by, let's say, 5%. The infamous World Economic Forum death panel, let's just call it. Okay. The panel has been tasked with determining who needs to be eradicated. The population of the Earth is 7.6 billion people, so they get to choose 382 million people for euthanasia. This is how who would be determined a useless eater would be accomplished. Oh, you don't work anymore? You're beyond childbearing years? You have medical conditions? You're on the list. Now, I'm not talking cattle cars and trains and gas chambers and ovens, but the end result's going to be the same. You'll cease to exist. Think I'm kidding? Here's a quote for you. Depopulation should be the highest priority of U.S. foreign policy toward the third world. Henry Kissinger said that in 1974 while he was Secretary of State. He called for making involuntary mass sterilizations and birth control a prerequisite for U.S. aid to foreign countries, wanting hundreds of millions of people eliminated, including by withholding food aid to nations that don't control their population growth. His classified National Security Study Memorandum 200 called for global depopulation plan of action to prevent unwanted people from using raw materials and other resources wanted for profit making. So get rid of them. I mean, this is literally a U.S. policy. Kissinger's comments recently: there's great risk ahead that ordinary, you and me, ordinary people in the West will lose fundamental human, civil, and social rights on the phony pretext of protecting and preserving national security, along with stiffer neoliberalism to continue transferring enormous amounts of wealth to privileged interests. Any of that sound familiar? Okay. You see, Kissinger favors a ruler/serf society with U.S.-dominated NATO enforcing things. Endless wars, controlling the public mind, silencing dissent, eliminating non-believers. His ideal world for the privileged is dystopian hell for the vast majority of ordinary people everywhere. You see, the billionaires want to play God. They want to be the ones who choose who lives and who dies. They want to be immortal themselves. They believe they are, okay? And be the ones that determine your fate, when, where, and how you will perish. This is where death comes into play again, guys. You and I, at our age, may not live long enough to see this diabolical plan ever come to fruition. But we need to think about our children and our grandchildren, okay? We won't be able to cheat death. Eventually, we're going to perish. Eventually, everybody is. We all know this. You know, those of us who got a couple of brain cells up here, okay? But what will we leave behind for our offspring? Okay, what type of world will we be leaving them? Okay, again, death, which had become a feeble old woman, invades our life on a daily basis until the last day when there's no more life in us to invade. Pinball out.